Welcome to our first webinar hosted by our Educational Psychologist, Mrs. Andrea Jacobs. We're going to embark on a journey speaking about relationships between you and your child, roles, how do we manage self-care, and really tackle a couple of difficult conversations. Obviously, there's no easy way of raising a child, and there's no manual. So this is really a conversation type of webinar where we will give tools and tips. You are also welcome to make use of the chat function if you have specific questions for Mrs. Jacobs. Thank you so much for your time. And yes, over to you, Mrs. Jacobs. Thanks so much.
Maybe if I unmute my mic firstly. Thank you so much, Mr. Stander. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today and taking so much time out of your very, very busy schedule. I must just say, Mr. Stander, I completely agree with you that there is no manual for raising a kid. So I hope that what we go through in this webinar series can be some form of a bit of a manual for you in terms of parenting and connecting with Gen Z. So firstly, I'd like to just start off with saying definitely we'd love this to be very conversational, very experiential. So if there are any questions, any comments that you guys have as we go through, please feel free, raise your hand, pop it in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to jump over and answer those questions for you.
So like I was saying, we're going to be talking about parenting Gen Zs. So firstly, what exactly is a Gen Z? I hear a lot of my students, a lot of my clients talking about Gen Zs, Gen Ys, and all these things. So Gen Zs is anyone between the ages of 10 and 25. And I think essentially, your kids at Abbotts should fall in this age group. And maybe if you even have kids a little bit older than that. So looking at how to actually parent this group of individuals. So I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. I do have some slides that I'd like us to go through, but it's not a lecture or anything like that. It's just in terms of take-home points. If you guys would like to take notes of anything, that would be on the screen for you to do so. Okay, perfect. All right. So I think before we, go into anything, it's important to reflect on the role that we have as parents and the relationship that we have with our children. And a very, very important thing is the stage that they are currently at. So if we think about adolescence or early adulthood, if you'd like to put it like that, or pre-adolescence, everything that they do is all about testing. And I think a lot of you could probably comment on this or even give some testimonies about this in terms of how your kids test you at this point of their lives. But essentially, the testing that happens is happening in what they consider to be a safe space. So in the parental child role, there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of established connection. So there would be a lot of testing of relationship, testing of boundaries and things like that happening. It's similar to when you think back to when they were toddlers and they kind of tested certain things. If I'm going to touch this, what is mom and dad going to do? What are they going to say? So now they've gone back into that phase. And essentially what's happening now is that they are learning to test and develop their individuality. individuality. So essentially every single thing that happens in their relationships at this point is about testing relationships, testing trust. And a lot of this is based on trusting relationships or being able to trust those around them. I cannot tell you guys in how many times in practice, especially, if I think about my younger clientele in terms of the adolescent age group, a lot of them talk about not being able to connect and not being able to build good friendships. And that's all because of this trusting relationship that we're talking about. If we think about, where kids are at these days, a lot of it is based on social media. A lot of it is based on, the internet. It's very easy to hide behind a screen and say certain things. So I think that has, released a whole bunch of, other monsters for kids. And it becomes difficult in terms of deciding or feeling that they can trust the people around them. So it's important to note that in the parental-child relationship, it should be established and based on trust. Okay. So another point that I've got here is judgment deters. as soon, and I see this, daily in terms of practice, as soon as a teenager sniffs out any form of judgment, they instantly close off. Remember that everything is about testing, everything is about trusting. So when we engage with them, when we try to connect with them, everything needs to be as open and as honest in terms of what they're coming to us with, what we feel, as possible. So any sense of judgment that they get from you, whether it is facial reactions, whether it is the tone that you're using, whether it is anything that you do, it will instantly deter them. So it's always important to kind of reflect on where we are at as parents when we engage, when we try to connect with our children. Um, Sometimes a little bit easier said than done. I mean, if you think about coming home after a long day, you're tired, and the last thing that you want while you're having your cup of tea or cup of coffee in the evening is for your child to come over to you and like, oh, I need to talk to you about this, and all you want to do is kind of decompress and switch off. But it's important to know that for them, they might feel that that's the optimal time for them to kind of talk to you about something. On the note of talking, to our kids and or talking to anyone, I think as parents, one of the most important things that we want is for our kids to be able to talk to us, for our kids to feel like they can freely just come and speak to us about anything that happens. So connection is key. I know it's a little bit of a cliche saying, but essentially, if we think about it, showing them that we are able to connect with them at the level that they are at opens the door for them to build this trusting relationship, to feel that they are not being judged, to feel that they can trust the relationship with us. And then obviously that opens up the door and allows them to feel like, hey, I can actually come to mom and dad or whoever, my guardian, and speak to them about anything that's happening, because there won't be any judgment, or they won't kind of think of me in a different way. Okay. Another thing is when the kids are going through this adolescent phase, image and identity is very, very important. Like I said a few minutes ago, that they are establishing their identities and they're establishing their independence. So for them, everything that they perceive that we think of them, or that the outside world thinks of them, obviously kind of taints how they kind of engage with that relationship. So showing them that they can trust you, showing them that they can come to you is very, very important in terms of being able to connect with them. Okay. So, important question, and like Mr. Stander said, we are going to be giving some tips. So, how do you actually gain access? Obviously, as the parent, you'd come in and be like, oh, what happened at school today? Is there anything that you want to tell me? And then instantly your teenager says, no, nothing. Okay, and you're thinking to yourself, but what am I doing wrong? So, some key points here is firstly to understand where they are at. And I think it's a little bit difficult sometimes for a lot of parents, because when we think about parenting, when we think about our teens or our kids, we think about it from our point of view in terms of how we grew up or our perspective. But it's important to understand that there's been a drastic dynamic shift in terms of the way we grew up. And I'm saying myself as well, I'm pretty young, but I think even when I do speak to the kids, I see a big difference in myself and in them. So there's a big change in terms of how we grew up and how they are having to grow up. And it's important that we excuse me, firstly acknowledge that, and that we are aware of that whenever we're engaging with any kind of engagement with kids. Another one is to follow their lead. So like I said, as soon as you say to them, is there anything that you want to talk about? And they say no. Remember that it has nothing to do with you when they say, no, I don't want to speak about anything. And I'm going to become very psychologist here and say, it's not your stuff, it's their stuff. And that is, maybe feeling that someone else had judged them, or a previous experience, in terms of engagement, kind of deterred them or anything like that. So don't take it personal when they say that they don't want to talk to you in that moment. What you can do is to say to them, okay, whenever you are ready, just know that I am available for you. But with that comes the openness to, when they do show up, to be prepared for that and to be willing to engage with them in that moment. So following their lead, going at their pace in terms of what they want to talk about. Oftentimes, I think parents tend to, and this is something that I've seen in practice, where parents tend to become a little bit defensive, where kids will say something, or I'm feeling or I experience this to be happening. And parents will instantly go into this like defensive mode, like, but I'm doing it because. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because I think that's how a lot of people understand engagement and how to engage with each other. But it's important to understand acknowledging someone's feelings and then saying, okay, so I'm hearing, or I understand that you're feeling like that, and I apologize, or I'm very sorry, but it wasn't my intention, and then to explain. So always first acknowledge and then explain. Okay, because as soon as you get defensive, that's when they close off, and that deterrent happens, because they're like, oh, you see, now I've tried to speak to you and just nothing's happening once again. Okay, enter their world. Um, this is a little bit tricky, but if they are on social media, sometimes they would not want you to, follow their pages or anything like that there. But if they do, to show interest in the things that they have interest in. Sometimes kids and parents chalk and cheese, but it's important to kind of entertain what they enjoy, what they like, um, what they know about. Let them be the expert of their own lives sometimes, and say to you, okay, this is what I know, and to just sit back and, enjoy your child in that moment. Speaking their language. This is something that's been a little bit difficult for me in practice, because they come out with all these fancy words. And I think, Mr. Stander, of you with the chuffing and the lit and chai and all these fancy words that they use. But speaking their language more in terms of understanding, their developmental level, not trying to kind of lecture them. I think this is sometimes something that kids perceive quite often, is that parents tend to lecture rather than listen. And when you go down to their level, when you speak their language, you kind of meet them on a very, very different plane. Okay. This one, I think, is a little bit tricky for every parent, but I think it's important to share your experiences as well. The reason I say that is because kids, any child, any person, loves to speak to someone that they feel that they can relate to. So as soon as they see that, you are not foreign to something that they're experiencing, most likely they will connect, they will open up easier. I'm not saying give them the full details of, when you went out when you were younger or anything like that, because that might just be like, oh, but you went out, why can't I go out? But sharing experiences of certain things that you have gone through and the lessons that you've learned from them is extremely useful. Like I said, it shows them that you are relatable. It shows them that you have experience, that they can come to you when something happens. Okay. Meeting their needs, and I'm going to come back to this a little bit later on in the webinar, but being able to understand what their needs are. Very, very often, I cannot even tell you guys the percentage of kids that come in and end up in therapy, not because of the things that are happening at school or the things that are happening with their friends, but if anything, the connection that they have with their parents, and them experiencing or feeling that their parents are not there for them in the way that they need. So oftentimes I'll hear things like, oh, my parents say to me, oh, but I pay your school fees, and I take you to school, and I feed you, and I do this, and I plan trips for you, or I send you with your friends or anything like that. And that is not what the child needs. Sometimes kids just need a hug, or they just need someone to, be there and say to them, are you okay? If you think about yourselves, how many times or how often or how long ago has someone actually said to you, are you okay? And actually meant it, and actually really wanted to know if you're okay, and not just in conversation, hi, how are you doing, type of thing. So being able to understand, to read your child, and to, I mean, you know them best, so read them and understand, I can see that something is off with you. I'm not saying that you have to speak to me now, but when you're ready, know that I am available for you to come talk to me. Or do you just need a hug, or do you need some space? That's another one. Sometimes parents tend to suffocate the kids a little bit too much, and what the kids actually need is just some space to process something, and then engage with their parents at a different point and say to them, okay, now I'm ready to talk about this. I wasn't 5 minutes ago or 2 days ago, whatever. But understand what their needs are. Okay. So further to that, how do we then maintain that connection? So once we have gained access, once we have, opened the door, like I said, of connection, how do we maintain that? Like I said, when they do come, and I think this is a little bit tricky, but, being able to drop everything and be an active listener, with them and listen to what they're actually saying to you. So I often say to people, there's a big difference between hearing someone and listening to what they're actually saying. Okay. So, something that kids often tell me, like, oh, my parents will say to me that they're listening, but they're on their phones. So literally when I say drop everything, like drop whatever you're doing and just give them 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Or if you can't at that moment, help them to understand that and say, right now I'm busy doing something, but give me 10 minutes and then I'm all yours. That also sets up boundaries, which is also extremely important in terms of relationships. Okay. Active listening is when we listen and we reflect back what we're hearing. So if someone says, I'm going through a lot at school, there's a lot of academics, my friends are just being cruel to me. Oh, what I'm hearing is that you're extremely overwhelmed right now. What I'm hearing is that you don't feel connected to anyone. So when we listen actively, we can hear what the deeper or the underlying message is that people, not just our kids, are trying to tell us. Okay. Showing them that you are available and creating a space for conversation. Sometimes, we think, oh, let's just chat while we're watching a show. A common one for parents, like, oh no, but we watch movies together and I hope that they'll talk to me. That's, there's a third thing involved there, which is the TV. So saying to them, oh, would you like to go outside? Would you like to go to the kitchen or somewhere quiet and talk about this? Would you like it if we maybe left the house because there's other people around? Showing them that you value, them as a person, and that you value the privacy of what they're bringing to you. Another thing is to be able to be patient. Like I said, if they say to you, I'm not ready to talk about this now, or there's nothing right now. And when you open that door and say, when you are ready, please come to me and I will be available for you, be patient with that. Don't follow up, or don't be like, oh my gosh, I said that to her like 3 hours ago and I still haven't heard anything. Kids take time to process things the same way, we as adults do. Sometimes we need to just take a break from something, process it, understand it fully, and then, move into a space where we can talk about it. Another one is being able to choose our words very carefully. So sometimes, like I was talking about the judgment, the simplest slip of the wrong word can instantly kind of close off that conversation. So being aware of yourself, being aware of your own triggers, being aware of the things that you're saying to your child, is very, very important. Something I often say to clients is, when you struggle to like regulate yourself, listen, and before you respond, take a few seconds. So just take a deep breath, process what has been said to you, and then think about what you're going to say, how you're going to respond. Another one is be careful of giving advice. So like I said, kids often will come to me and be like, oh, my parents just lecture me. They don't even listen to what I'm saying. Okay. It is okay to not have to be a problem solver. Okay. And I know, as a parent, you think, oh my gosh, I have to solve the problem for them. I have to be there. So when they come to me, to be able to solve whatever it is that they're going through. Sometimes you do not need to be that. Sometimes just being there for your child, being there, available, like I said to earlier, for them and to them is more than enough. Essentially, in those kind of times and spaces, your purpose and your role would be to be a sounding board. We want, as parents and as teachers and as people that are involved with young people, to be able to raise them so that they can be contributing members of society. Essentially, that is the job of a parent. That is the job of any professional or any person dealing with a child. So in order to do that is not to rescue or not to solve problems for them every single time, but to be able to be a sounding board where you can offer some advice or some guidance based on your experience and your knowledge, because you definitely have that as a parent, and no one will ever take that away from you. But to just say, okay, let's hear what your ideas are, or how do you feel you'd like to handle this situation. Just an interesting fact, in terms of how our brains develop, we literally only build neural connections when we fail. So essentially, letting your kids fail, letting your kids do something wrong or make a mistake, literally builds more neural connections. It builds more pathways for them to be able to understand and solve problems better for themselves. Because essentially, as a parent, you have to let go at some point. And knowing that you were able to do this in a safe space that you created through everything that I've said thus far, allows them to kind of make good mistakes with your guidance, with your support, so that they can eventually build those connections. And one day when they, off in the world by themselves, that they can look back and say, okay, how would I have handled this? How can I handle this? How can I actually move on from this? Another big one is to focus on the positive. A lot of times kids perceive that parents only focus on the negative. So they'll often say to me, like, I clean the entire house, and my mom will say to me, or my dad will say to me, oh, but you didn't, sweep the yard, or you didn't take the bin out, or you didn't wash the dishes. Try to focus on the positive and say, wow, you really did such a good job, or you really tried so hard to do everything. I see that you have forgotten, the dishes. Maybe next time try and remember that, but well done on what everything else that you did. So try and incorporate both good and bad. Also, try not to bring up the past. Oh, but last year you did so bad in mathematics, or last year you hung out with terrible friends. Rather focus on what they're doing right. Remember that this is part of conditioning, so a little bit of sneaky psychology in there. The more we want certain behaviors, we have to praise those and condition them. The more you speak about the negative, you essentially just reminding the person of those things. So when you do see positive behaviors, or when you do see change, like, oh, I see that you've really, your friend group has changed, and you're really making good decisions these days, and I'm so proud of you. Well done. Or I see that you really thought hard about that, or you really tried on your maths test, even if they got like 2% higher, from the last time, to focus on those things and not bring up the bad stuff, especially, from the past. Okay. So one of my most favorite things in terms of actually working on someone's needs, and this is something that I think is important, not only for relationship, parent-child relationships, but any kind of relationship that you're in. So whether it's your spouse, whether it is, a sister, a brother, whatever the case is, the easiest way to find out what someone's needs are is to find out what their love language is. So for those of you that aren't familiar with love languages, and we all have our own love languages, there are 5 of them. So words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and receiving gifts. So there are quizzes that you can do online. There are a whole bunch of things that you can do in terms of finding out what your love language is, and what finding out your child's, in this case, love language is. So, like I said, this is one of the easiest ways of actually tapping into what it is that your child needs, or how your child responds best. So if it's words of affirmation, being able to say to them, I'm so proud of you, or you did so well today, or that was such a good effort. If it is quality time, setting up mom-daughter dates, or daddy-daughter, or daddy-son dates, where you just take that child with you and do something special with them, let's say once a month. So if you have 2 kids, take one of them for something that they really like. So take them for ice cream after school, or take them to watch a soccer game, or whatever the case is, or take them shopping, or whatever. So spending quality time with them. Physical touch is literally things like cuddling or hugs, anything like that, where you're literally able to touch the person. So giving them, like a little squeeze on the shoulder when they did something good, or high five, anything like that. acts of service, so doing something for them. So this one is a little bit tricky in terms of teenagers because we want to teach them responsibility, but also, saying, oh, I packed your lunch for you this morning, so you didn't have to because I know that you have a test coming up. Knowing that they usually pack their lunch, for example, is an example of acts of service. Receiving gifts, just buying them something random, not for their birthday, whatever, not because they just did well on a test, but buying something small that reminded you of them when you went into spa or whatever. So, oh, I know that you love chocolate brownies and I just picked this up for you. So I hope it means something, or I hope that you enjoy it, whatever the case is. So find out what your child's love language is, and this is the easiest way in terms of meeting their needs. So being a parent, like we said, we're also touching on roles. It's important to note that being a parent is different from being a friend. And I think this is where it gets a little bit tricky. I think a lot of you might be thinking, oh, but Andrea, a lot of the stuff that you told us today is not very parental, and it sounds more like being a friend. There are different parenting styles, and I mean, you guys can, Google search those, but essentially you want to find the balance between these. Like I said earlier, you all have certain experience, you have certain knowledge, you have certain skills that make you a good parent, but also being able to understand your child on their level, without being a friend to them. So we don't want to become too much of their friend, but we also don't want to be too much of an authoritative parent. So try to find that balance, for yourself and your child, and maintain that level, because that's the best way that you are going to kind of establish and maintain that connection. So self-care. It is not easy being a parent, especially in today's day and age. And I think there's so much pressure on parents. If I think about some of the memes I've seen, on social media, it's like you have to give your kids the best schooling and, be a career person, and the low GI diet, or whatever the case is, and do this and take them to sports and, still maintain your own relationships and things like that. So I think there's a lot of pressure on parents at the moment, and it's difficult to juggle all of these things. So it's important that you take care of yourself. And the little image I've included there, stands for something I love saying to clients, is that you can't pour from an empty cup. So always make time for yourself first. It's not selfish. Sometimes I speak to, whether it's family, whether it's clients, like, but how can you say that, my kids come first? And I'm like, no, you have to be able to understand that you and your kids are separate, and that you have to take care of yourself first, so that when you are well enough, when you do not have any stuff, as psychologists like to put it, that you are able to meet the needs of your child and be there for them fully, and that you're able to model what it is like to be a good parent or good member of society. So some of the key things here is being able to understand your triggers. Okay, so what are the things that get under your skin? Understanding the things you project. So oftentimes parents will try and live vicariously through their children, or I couldn't do this when I was a child, so you have to do it. So be careful of the things that you project, not only onto your kids, but maybe onto your spouse or people around you. Being able to spend time with your own friends, maintaining your own relationships is paramount. So showing your kids, that this is how you, manage relationships, that you're supposed to have relationships with friends. This is what it looks like, but also, doing that for yourself. Scheduling some me time, whatever it looks like for you, whether it's having your morning cup of coffee or playing a round of golf or, having a long bath, whatever it is. But being able to schedule that me time where you just decompress and you focus on yourself. Prioritizing activities that make you happy. So, doing things like painting or walking in the park, whatever the case is. But whatever makes you happy, try and fit it into your schedule somewhere. I would say at least once a week, if possible, so that you recharge that battery for yourself. Okay. Schedule some time to talk to another adult every single day, especially if you have some young kids. I think, cocoa melon starts coming out of both ears, but also dealing with teenagers, there's a lot of things that they go through, and then you sit there and think to yourself, like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of this drama, or what am I doing wrong, or, things like that there. But not talking about your kids, talking about adult stuff, having adult conversations where you're able to kind of maintain your own sanity and your own individuality. Allowing yourself to cry. I know this is, very touchy subject for a lot of people, but essentially we want to be able to let go of our emotions when things get rough, to just, it's literally, I say to clients, if you feel like crying is a bad thing, then just say, I'm literally just washing out my eyes. I'm giving them time to like rehydrate themselves, but allowing yourself to kind of be emotional, um, understand your body, understand your mental health, understand what your needs are. So whether it's a good cry or a bad cry, but allowing yourself to do that. Another thing is that this parents sometimes have this misconception that they have to be strong, that they have to be put together in front of their kids. And all this does is it puts undue pressure on children, for them to think, oh my gosh, my parents are just like perfect. And if I fall apart, what is that? So to be able to show kids that it is okay to not be okay sometimes, but it's how we pick ourselves up that builds that resilience. To be able to show them how to handle their emotions. When you're sad, it's okay to be sad, but after that, you pick yourself up and you carry on with whatever it is that you have to do. Okay, so those kind of things are quite important. Find things that make you laugh. Always a good one. Say no to responsibilities. I think a little bit difficult sometimes for some people. I think my screen just went dead for a second. Please just give me 2 seconds there. But being able to prioritize and say no when things get too much. Remember that your plate also needs to be managed appropriately. As much as I say you need to have these many vegetables, this many carbs, you also need to have this much family time, this much me time, and this much work time. So being able to say no to certain things, whether it is family responsibilities that you cannot handle, work responsibilities, whether it is your me time, but putting in boundaries for yourself, because this again is modeling good behavior for our kids, for them to understand that boundaries, and I love saying this to clients, boundaries do not shut people out, they show people where the door is. So essentially saying, you know what, this is how you will access me, and I'm not being mean about this, but I'm protecting myself and I'm showing my kids how to do that. Okay. I think I have spoken quite a bit and given you guys a whole bunch of information. So I'd like to just hand over to the audience, if there are any questions or any comments that you guys have, anything that I can answer for you, while we have a few minutes left over for questions. So I see a question coming in terms of my child hasn't made any friends at school. How do I help him? Also a very, very big one for a lot of young kids, especially the ones coming into a new school. Remember that everything that happens in the parental-child relationship, like I said, builds that for them. So be patient with them. Tell them to be patient with themselves. They are still trying to figure out who they are, let alone figure out who everyone else is and who they can trust. So saying to them things like, okay, find people, experience different people. You don't have to hang out with one group of people forever. But, engage with a whole bunch of people, be able to put yourself out there. So I think Valerie, encourage him to kind of put himself out there, to go out and speak to certain people. If it is that he has something like social anxiety and that's something that's quite difficult for him, you can always tell him to come over to my office, and I'm happy to kind of work with him to kind of help build, any kind of relationship like that. But it's quite a common one. Okay. Just on the topic of okay, Iman, I see your question. I'm going to come back in a second. Just in terms of, the parent-child relationship and how I said it kind of shows them what to expect in terms of relationships in the outside world. If you think about it, a lot of times people will say, oh, you chose someone that's just like your dad, or you chose someone that's just like your mom. And essentially, there's quite a bit of truth to that. And that's why we want to have functional and good relationships with our kids, because that is what they go out looking for. People that will fill their needs in a certain way, or people that will make them feel similar to the good that they feel in the parent-child relationship. So I think the question, Iman, you were asking about how do you handle self-harm when it's used more for manipulative purposes. I think firstly understanding, why your child could be self-harming, or why there was a start to self-harming. Um, Self-harming is usually some way of releasing, some way of regulating. So it could have started like that. But if it is turning into more of a manipulative situation, to try and foster that relationship where your child feels like they can come and speak to you rather than do something like that. So I think just your awareness of how you have been responding to it could have kind of exacerbated the situation. But also, if it is something that has become pathological, I would then maybe refer to a psychologist, because it is not useful for a child to be manipulating a parent like that, and for the child to understand, as much as we're saying we are there to understand them and there to kind of be there for them, they still do need to understand that parents are at the top of the hierarchy at the end of the day. I hope that helps, Iman, sorry. Yes, please go ahead for us.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I actually kind of like have two issues. My friends, my friend's son got into a fight, but hit someone. Actually, he was the one who was hitting the other person who was defenseless. And I took that, I wouldn't say very badly, but it affected me so much that I couldn't engage him or his parents. So
Okay.
it basically ruined the relationship. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm just amiable, like just saying hi, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
But with this, it was worse. I think it still is that I don't want him in the house, and I know it affects him somehow. I tried to tell him where I'm coming from. Also telling him I don't mind him having as a friend. I'm just not comfortable with him around, especially in the house. And I have a daughter as well, and it's 9. And the friend was beating up someone, also the boy who was 9. So I'm just scared for them. Yeah, basically. And at the same time, I don't know if I handle it well with my son. I don't want him to think, I don't know. Yeah. So basically, I will appreciate some advice on that. As I'm speaking about it now, I get so emotional. I was so angry with that. Yeah. Thank you.
I can definitely hear the emotion behind your question. Firstly, thank you for being so open and so honest with your response, and what it is that you are feeling. I think, without getting too deep in terms of what's going on there, I think it's important to kind of um, unpack for yourself early on I was speaking about your triggers and your projections. There's something in it, and that's why you're becoming quite emotional now as you speak about it, that scares you, that you're concerned about. And at face value, we think about the fact that, hey, my child is 9, the kid was 9, it's a direct correlation. But to understand that there's something deeper there for yourself, to unpack that and make sense of that for yourself. Another thing is to just be open and honest with your son, and say to him, hey, listen, it's not that, I don't want to hang around your friend or whatever, but this is what mom is feeling. And that is literally the best way to kind of build that connection with him. How you handled it in that moment was the best way you knew how, based off what you were feeling and what you were going through. So to be able to kind of process and unpack for yourself what you are going through, and then to go to your son and say, this is what mom is feeling, this is what I'm going through, please understand that that's where I'm at. I hope that helps you. You said you have another question or something that you wanted to ask. I don't know if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, this one is just lighter. I hope I'm not wasting anyone's time. My son is so disorganized. Like literally, I know like his room, it gets on me. Like literally every day, it's there, whatever is all over and stuff like that. I'm forever packing. I know I need to stop or something. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. From my
Okay.
side. Thank you.
All right. So shame, teenagers, oh my gosh, they can be extremely messy. But I think to kind of address with him and say, listen, dude, at some point you need to be accountable for your space. And like, how can I help you to be better at this, you know? And to start with small tasks. So for to say to him, like, let's do something manageable. Maybe don't eat in your bedroom and leave the dirty plates there, because it's going to bring germs, it's going to bring things that we don't want, in the house. So at least just try, after you eat, take your dishes out, or try not to make that messy. And like I said, when you see good behavior, to praise it. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy you actually didn't eat in your room today. Or you actually try to make your bed. Wow, look at you, to kind of encourage the good behaviors when they do happen. Or to like help him with like the bigger chores. Sometimes things get very overwhelming, and then we kind of lose focus of it. Another meme I'm thinking of is like, it takes it takes a few hours to do the washing, but it takes 7 working days to actually fold it and put it away. So it could just be that he's extremely overwhelmed, and is struggling to manage the task. So to start in like small increments, and then praise when you see some good behavior. Okay. I'm just heading over to the chat. I see there were some questions that came in as I was talking to you. Okay. So, Valerie, I'm just reading your question there in terms of your son being quite introverted and not being able to open up. Yes, as a parent, you are always going to feel like, oh my gosh, what is it? How can I help? How can I problem solve? Like I'm saying to you, sometimes kids just feel like, I don't want to burden someone else with my problems. I don't know how to express what it is that I'm feeling. So say to him, like, I'm here. Whenever you're ready, just be available for him and be patient. Like I was saying earlier, it might take some time, but constantly just say to him, I'm ready. I'm available. Whenever you want to talk, just know that mom is here for you. And try not to kind of guess what's going on with him. I think that can sometimes make things worse. So just be available for him. When he comes in, if it's something that you feel is a little bit too serious, please encourage him to come see me, and I will engage him on that a little bit further. Okay. Okay, the next question I think I saw Mr. Stander touching on. Juanita, I think the same, like I just said to Valerie, just try and be available. Sometimes little boys or young boys also don't want to come to their moms with problems or come to their dad with problems. They feel like they have to handle things by themselves. So saying to them, listen, you don't have to go through this alone. If it is difficult for you, I'm happy to be there. So just be available. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing here, I think it's M. Rufus saying, my daughter's focused on the social aspect and there's consequences. Okay, so I think, to just say to her that I understand right now that there is a very big social component in terms of forging your own identity, building relationships, but it's also important that you are still focusing on your academics. So say to her, how can we, and always put it back in their, in their court. How can we manage both of these things? So we'll say you can go out on weekends, but also understanding that, during weekdays, can you commit to your homework, or at least during homework lesson at school, focus during that time, so at least you have a few minutes after school, to spend time with your friends or whatever the case is. I hope that helps. Okay. Dishes in the room. Okay. All right. I don't know if there's anything else from anybody else in the audience. Mr. Stander?
Hi, Mrs. Jacobs. Yes, thank you. This has been so insightful. I think it's important to also note that social media for them is everything at this stage, and that should be managed as well. And unfortunately, that comes with the parenting. Lots of things that comes past my office is to do with social media. It's been mismanaged. But allow them to make use of social media, but manage it. Give certain times in which they can use it. And my last remark would be, and it's especially with the boys, I always joke and I say 99.9% of what's going on with them is hormones at this stage. And that can be a leading factor of why they get into fights and arguments, and they tend to disagree. And we know with boys being or developing not as fast as the girls, it takes a bit of time.
I couldn't have said it better, and I think, Mr. Stander, you definitely have more experience and knowledge on the hormone side of things there. But 100%, I think, like I was saying, understanding where your child is at developmentally, looking at where they're at and kind of talking to them about what's socially appropriate and what's not. Just to touch on social media, Shem, I don't want to take up too much time, but I see that we still have a few more minutes. Kids love social media. For a lot of them, what they think is that that's the only way for them to kind of connect with people. Like I said, if you think about it, it's easy to hide behind a screen or to make certain comments on somebody's profile or someone's picture. If you think about yourselves, you might find someone that you went to school with and you're like, I don't know if I can friend this person or not. I'm like, oh, but it's social media. It's fine. Everyone does it. I can friend them now, even though, we haven't spoken in years, or I didn't really connect with them in terms of that. And sometimes online connections are a lot more richer than face-to-face connections because of that dropping of the guard. And I think that's what kids enjoy about social media. But with that is exactly what Mr. Stander said. It's important that be managed well, because we want to make sure that the people that they are connecting with are savory individuals, are not people that are going to sway them in the wrong direction or kind of influence them negatively. And that's why it's so important that you have a good relationship with them, that they feel that they can express who their friends are, what it is that they're talking to their friends about. An easy way is, like, if they want to go out with their friends, to say, okay, no, sure, you can go out with your friends, obviously within reason in terms of your parenting style, after I meet them. Say, I'd love to meet them first, so I know who you're with, or I know that you're safe. It's not that I'm calling you every 5 minutes because I want to nag you, but it's because I'm worried about you. If you think about the climate of where South Africa is at right now, I need to make sure that you're okay. So can you check in with me every half an hour, or can I meet your friends, for example? I think that's very, very important. I'm not sure if there is anything else. Mr. Stander, I don't know from your side if you'd like to kind of say anything else. But I'm so glad that you enjoyed it, Shwanita. We will be having 2 more webinars that we will kind of continue off this one in terms of parenting Gen Zs. If you guys have any more questions, if there's anything else that you'd like me to help you out with, please feel free to contact me at Abbotts. My email address is ajacobs@abbotts.com. .com or .co.za? Now I can't even remember. But I think it should be one of those. Or else, I am there on Mondays and Wednesdays if you'd like to pop in and come and, chat to me about anything that's happening with your kids. I'm more than willing to kind of, help you guys out. And also be there for you as well as parents if there's something that you are going through. please, you're more than welcome to pop into my office as well. So I see one more question there from Mbali saying, how do we actually draw the line between enabling and teaching accountability? So this is where modeling becomes very, very important. Remember that I think a lot of the things that I've said today may come across as being very lenient in terms of your parenting style, but it's actually not. When you model the kind of behavior that you want, when you model what it is that you want your kids to see, remember, kids see what you do and do the same rather than listen to you. Oh, but mom, you always on your phone. Why can't I? That kind of situation. So being able to model what you want, but also set good boundaries for them should be able to kind of help that. Mbali, I hope that helps. Okay. Mr. Standisham, I'll hand over back to you if there's anything else you want to say in closing. But thank you all for joining. It was amazing sharing this time with you, and thank you so much for your questions. I think all of you are amazing parents. The fact that you are here today, the fact that you had all these questions definitely shows that. And I hope that the first chapter of our manual was very helpful to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jacobs. I really think this was so informative. And if I can ask you one thing, is that before you go to bed tonight, is to tap yourself on the shoulder and say, well done. I think this is the biggest profession and the most difficult profession is being a parent. So to all of you, well done and keep it up. It's trial and error, and we'll definitely unpack and go through. We are here to support always. And what we'll do is we'll also provide Mrs. Jacobs' contact details of an email for you in the newsletter. And we'll be sending out the recording of this webinar so that if you have any questions, you can reach out to her. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy your evening. And Mrs. Jacobs, once again, thank you so much. And thank you for the value which you are adding to our school and to our community. It really has a positive, big impact.